So we're back out with Harry the lathe again then, the RAGLAN 5-inch centre lathe, and we're still trying to put this drive belt on. And let's have a look at where we're heading this time, because if we look down the back here we can see this fork arrangement here, and that fork arrangement fits there, it fits there, and this pin here is captivated in this slot here. And what happens is, as we turn this lever here, it rotates these forks, and these forks then push the pin backwards and forwards, taking this shaft with it, and that shaft then opens or closes these variator pulleys here. That's how the system works. And I had immense difficulty getting this pin out. As you can appreciate, that pin goes further down into the shaft, and it stands ever so slightly proud of the top face of this fork arrangement at the top and also at the bottom. So I was trying to hammer the pin up from the bottom and knock it loose by hitting it at the top as well, and trying to twist it and trying to grab it with pliers and vertically pull it upwards, but all in the confines of this little area here, which I found a great struggle. So I'll show you some photographs just now of what that looks like with that in. I was going to put that back in so I could take another film of it, because I seem to have lost the footage somewhere of that arrangement there being in its position there. So I'll show you a couple of photos that I have got of it. But in any event, that is proving so problematic getting back in that I've decided not to do it just for filming. It's just taking too long. So when I do put this thing back together, I'm expecting a bit of a trauma in doing so. But that's the scenario anyway. And we'll have a quick look at what's going on, and then moving on from that, I have already loosened this cap screw here, and this is the boss that leads to the inside of the head and operates the variator pulley inside the head of the lathe. One fastens on here and activates that pulley obviously, and the other, this boss here, goes into the head of the lathe and operates the shaft that will operate the pulley down in the bottom. And what I'm finding currently is, with the setup as it is, I still cannot get the pulley far enough across to the right to get my belt in. So now I'm going to try and remove this piece here, which is that piece there, and my hope is then, once now that I've got these forks off and the pin out, I'm hoping I can now drift this shaft here through this boss. I'll have to hold this boss still whilst I drift this shaft off to the left out of the way, and I can drift that from this end here. That's the end of the shaft as it comes through the bearing piece on the head sock of the lathe. So I'm going to drift that round bar through, hopefully, and then I'm hoping that I can then pull this boss here this way out of the head sock, thereby giving me more room to get the inside pulley further that way to get my belt through. So let's see how it pans out. Let's have a look at those photos, and then we'll continue then with the struggles that are about to come forth while I'm trying to get this moved along this shaft, etc. Okay, bye for now. Well, I'm going to some wild extremes to try and get this pin out of here. I've had this pin glowing red. As you can see there, it's glowing red just now. But yeah, I'm trying to loosen this pin out of its housing. It's not for want of trying that it's not coming out at the moment. I'm trying to heat the shaft up below the pin, to be fair, but I've had the pin glowing red, so that should expand and hopefully crack off any stuckness, hopefully, just to crack off the friction that's holding it. And I've got the hose pipe at the ready just in case there's a fire. It's like an oxypropane. It's like an oxypropane kit that I'm actually using. I'll show you in another clip shortly. If I had a smoke detector in here, I think it'd certainly be going off now. I think that might do for this session. See if that's made any difference at all. I did try this last night, but that didn't seem to work, so this is my second attempt now at trying to heat this thing up to break the contact seal, whatever's holding the two together. Of course, I've removed the cloth that I had down the back there, so that there's no material down the back there. Certainly fairly hot down there. Well, I'll let that cool down now and then see whether I can knock the pin out then. So here's the setup that I'm using. Turbo Set 1000 portable brazing kit, Oxy Turbo. That's the thing there, Turbo Set 1000 Oxy Turbo, and I'm using a gas and oxygen. So if we look now down the back of there, we are getting a bit further. We've got this device loose of that pin now by bringing it past the forks that we can just see turning now. You can just see the forks down in the bottom there. And I undid the Allen grub screw in the side of the fork, but it still wouldn't, I still couldn't move this handle round without the forks turning. But after several heating sessions and lots of hammering, the forks are still not turning, shall we say, but I can now lift this up and the forks are drifting down the shaft. They're not rotating on the shaft, but they're drifting down the shaft as I pick the shaft up. As we can see there, the forks are being left behind. So they're down there at the moment. Now if we look closely, I think I'm seeing some kind of a keyway there as well. Or maybe that's where the screw fastens into the grub screw that goes in the side of this casing here. Well, you can't see it now because my big fingers are in the way. If I take this, so looking at that, we can see in the side here, there is a hole for a grub screw that I've removed, and these forks still wouldn't come loose, but there's obviously some kind of a channel in this bar that I've just been pulling up. It's revealed a channel now in the bar, so we don't know what that's about, but we'll find out. Me and my son's come round to help me, so that's good. So we've ventured a little bit further, and I don't know how we managed to wangle them past this pin, the two forks, but somehow they've come past this pin, so that's a blessing. And let's see what happens now. So let's just have a quick look at the end of this shaft here then that we've pulled up. So now we've pulled it completely clear of that hole there. We can see perhaps where the Allen grub screw might have been to. Using these exceptionally long pliers that we can see here, and I reached down the back of there, got the forks and passed them inside the head here, and then I got hold of them inside the bottom of the head and picked them up through the hole at the extreme far end, which is under there. I put my hand in under there and pulled the forks out, and there they are. So that's what they are. So there's an Allen grub screw that goes in there, but they still won't rotate on the shaft because they've got a keyway. But what you can do, you can pull the shaft up once you've loosened. Presumably I could have done that earlier, but I didn't really know. But with banging and hammering on this and applying heat, I think this has come somewhat more loose now, and so that handle's actually come up. So I think that's the way to get these out of the way. Now getting them back on, haha, well, let's see. But anyway, they're out of the way for now, so I'm going to try and move this wheel that's in the bottom of there, we can just see the flanges of it shining brightly. I'm going to try now and pull that into the head to clear that shaft there that's coming out through that hole. I'll be back in a moment. So having wrestled these forks free of this operating shaft then, that left me the pin more accessible. But how did I get that pin out of there? I tried hammering it, I tried heating it up several times to red to try and break it free of the hole that it was in, all to no avail. So the secret weapon I turned to eventually was this fantastic product, Plus Gas Formula A, and I just put a few drops of that on. It's an aerosol can. I put a few drops of that on, waited a couple of hours, I came back and the pin virtually fell out on its own with the hammer. I found it to be a brilliant product. I tried all sorts to get the pin out of the hole and I couldn't get it out, but that plus Gas Formula A freed it off in no time at all, which left me with, if we look down there now, an empty hole. What a struggle that was. So as I said at the beginning of this video, I've now got to try and get this shaft, this boss here, free of this shaft, so that I can hopefully pull this boss and the actuator arm out of the head and get the belt in. Let's see how we go. Well, it's been a gargantuan struggle on my own really, but this shaft is now coming free of this boss, and I've had to knock it through with the hammer shaft that you can see protruding through there. So really, ideally, it could be a two-person job, one to tackle the shaft from this end, whilst the other person holds the boss solid so that the shaft can be drifted through, So that's where we're at the moment. I'll just do a little bit more and then we'll get back to you. So we can see now then that without actually having to remove this actuator fully from this shaft, we can see that I've got the actuator and the shaft clear of the workspace. So now I'm going to see whether I can get the end of that shaft there into the head of the lathe such that I can get the belt round, now that we've freed up a bit of space in the bottom there. So I'll free this lower pulley off here from this belt, and that will allow this bottom shaft to float freely in the bottom of the headstock. I'll see how I go with that. I've slipped those lower pulleys now out of that frayed belt that we can see here, and it has given me a better positioning to move the pulley that we want out of the way. And as we can see, we're still not a lot of space between the end of the pulley shaft and the side casing of this headstock, but we should be able to get that belt twisted at 90 degrees probably and just past that shaft. It's not a great deal of space, but as we can see from this screwdriver here coming in, there is a little bit of space. So I've got to a position now where I can just about put the belt through the back there. So let's have a look. Between the edge of the casting and the end of that shaft there is about 10mm. That's about as much as I can get with the pulley system completely loose and just lying in the bottom. Let's have a look round the back. So there we are now. We can see there's plenty of space to get the belt between the side wall of the casting of the lathe and the pulley itself, but it does get a bit tight for getting the belt round the end of the shaft once it's all pulled inside the headstock of the lathe. we can see where I've ground and broken away the casting of this lathe, and I needn't have done that now that we realise how it's all put together, etc. But at the time I was led to believe that all of this didn't need to come apart that I've taken apart, and it was just a case of pushing the belting down the side of the pulley. But that wasn't the case on the RAGLAN 5-inch centre lathe. It may be the case with the Little Johns, but not with this. So if any Little John owners out there wanted to comment on that, that'd be great for everybody else just to know. Okay, thanks. I'll try and get that belt in now and we'll get back to you. Well, I hope you can make it out down there, but I have actually managed to get the belt around the end of that shaft, but I had to turn the belt at 90 degrees to get it past, because there's only about a 10mm gap between the edge of the shaft and the edge of the casting of the lathe. But I did get it in. Now I've got to try and get it onto the pulley. But I would think perhaps two people would be better doing this job, and then somebody perhaps can wrestle with the belt while somebody else can wrestle with this shaft down in the bottom, because it really is quite difficult on your own. And whilst I'm at this, I'm going to try and replace this belt here as well, the two belts here, but I'm going to try and use the T-link belt such that I don't have to remove all of this section here just to get two fixed belts in. So I'm going to go down the T-link belt section on that. But first of all, I'm going to try and get this belt in here, and I put the belt into the back of the lathe, as we can see, but I didn't put it round the pulley on the motor. I've left it free of the motor so that I can wrestle more freely with the belt itself. And with that magic spray, I've been able to get this pulley end loose as well. So that really is a good spray. That Plus Gas Formula A. I sprayed some on this side of the shaft, and I sprayed some in the hole there. So now hopefully I can remove this end of this pulley such that I can get that belt on to the end of the shaft, all being well. And also I can see hopefully what happened to that bit of pin that came out there. Hopefully try and find out where this bit goes. Well, we're part way there, but I can't stress enough how much of a two-man job this really is. Maybe even three, if you could possibly get three of you around the lathe at the same time. One to perhaps hold onto this shaft here, or as I was doing, I stuck a screwdriver into the threaded hole there and use that as a handle. One to reach down inside here and thread the belt on. I've still not got the belt directly onto the pulley itself, and that's where I'm struggling now, because I need to be over the top and underneath at the same time. But I can't see over the top and underneath at the same time. It would be lovely to put my hand in here and just reach inside and do the job from in there, but unfortunately you can't. Although it looks a very handy little area to play nicely through, there's no way through the back of there, I don't think, into the headstock. And in addition to that, this lid is part of the casting of this finger here. As we can see, this is all one that bears this shaft here with that pulley on, and that in turn is this shaft down here. So when you undo these screws here to lift this forward, that brace there comes forward as well, bringing that shaft, and all of this becomes loose and moving about, and that then ends up at this end over here with more fixings and such. So you don't want to be messing up with all that really. So if somebody could get their hand up inside there to support the this end of the job, while somebody looks under that side of the job and tries to fish it on, while somebody is. So again, we're still trying with this belt, but I would suspect that really it's a 2 or perhaps 3 man job to get this belt into this head. We can see the pulley, and the belt is now riding alongside the pulley, as it were, and it's just a matter of getting that onto the pulley, but I can't quite get it onto the pulley on my own. And I've had this screwdriver into the screwed end of this shaft so that I can lift this shaft up and move it around to try and aid me. As you can see, the belt's moving and the pulley's moving, and I've managed to get the thrust bearing, which is on this side here, back up against the edge of the pulley. Now I'm trying to get this belt onto the pulley in the bottom, whilst trying to get this fork that's on the end of this collar here around the shaft where it resides alongside the thrust bearing. But if you could get 3 people, that would be a lot better. So if you're doing this job, be prepared, get some family members or friends round to give you a hand with this, because it really is very annoying and very impractical to do on your own. I think whether it's doable on your own, I'm not really sure. I will let you know later. Well, it's a real struggle getting this belt through, because at the end of the day you've this shaft to organise with that boss here and the finger that goes inside here and holds onto the shaft and presses against the variator thrust bearing, and also there's the forks to get back in line and onto the lower end of this shaft here. Now what I've found is that on my lathe, at least, with the handle off to the left hand side here, that would be where the woodruff key would line up, but I don't think I'm going to get the woodruff key back in on my lathe. Somebody sent in the past, Jimmy it was, on Facebook, and he said that if I undid the grub screw in the forks would rotate independently of this shaft, and I'm thinking that's because perhaps Jimmy's woodruff key has been lost in the past and mine's fallen out somewhere, and without taking the motor off the back of the machine to gain a little bit more access through the back where the motor currently is, I don't think I'd ever get the woodruff key and such lined up. So ideally, if you could take the motor off, that would be a great advantage, such that you could get through a hole that's in the motor mounting bracket and arrange things there. If you could get somebody around the back of the lathe to do that while you're wrestling at the front.